Harry Greenway.
Very much, Madam Speaker. May I ask you, with great respect, what precedent there is for a chairman of Ways and Means to veto a bill which has such enormous implications for jobs and economic development in my constituency of Ealing North, the whole of London and beyond, as the Crossrail Bill has?
I fully support the course of action that was taken today by the Chairman of Ways and Means. The future legislation of that bill is now for the government to determine. It is not a matter for my Chairman of Ways and Means. It is now a matter for the government. Now we can perhaps move into, with the leave of the House, I put together the two questions on the motions relating to statutory instruments. The question is that the two instruments be referred to a standing committee on statutory instruments. Many of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. 10-minute rule motion, Mr. Anthony Steen. Excuse me, I have a point of order.
Point of order relating to this proposed bill. May I draw your attention...
Proposed bill.
Mr. Stevens? Yes. May I draw your attention to pages 528 and 529 of Erskine May? If you look at the section headed Proceedings on Royal Assent, you will see, Madam Speaker, that it says the Clerk of the Parliament subsequently endorses the acts with the customary Norman-French formulae. And that on page 29, 529, it gives the formulae for the royal assent for a public and private acts, la reine le veut, and for personal acts, soit fait comme il est désiré. What I am putting to you, Madam Speaker, that this bill, as the honourable gentleman appears to be introducing it, could undermine the royal prerogative. With regard to royal assents to acts, and could interfere with the ability of the Clerk of the Parliament to provide the royal assent to both Houses of Parliament. It seems to me, therefore, that this proposed bill might infringe both on the rights of the Clerk of Parliament and on the royal prerogative.
Yes, as the right honourable gentleman has just made clear to the House, of course, Court French of the 14th century is entirely permissible in this House in the instances that the right honourable gentleman has demonstrated to us. We shall now have to see whether the honourable member who is raising this bill is going to interfere with that Norman French, particularly of the 14th century, but I must hear what he has to say first before I can rule on it. Mr. Steele.
I'm seeking leave of the House to introduce a bill to outlaw the use of everyday French words in the English language, whether spoken or written, which, if infringed, will be punishable with a fine. I'm doing this principally to make a point, not to be taken too seriously, to highlight the bizarre situation which has resulted from the French language prohibition bill, or la loi relative à l'emploi de langue française, tabled by Jacques Toubon, the Gaullist culture minister, which passed through all its stages in both the French National Assembly and the Senate last Friday, banning the use of English words or expressions such as software, hamburger, football, T-shirt on advertising boards, in the media, in TV or radio, in work contracts, in structured leaflets, and even where English is the chosen language, at international congresses held in France, all French contributions have to be delivered in French. If you flout the law and sneak in an English word or two, you could be sent to the Bastille for 6 months. Or you could be fined £5,000. What Mr. Toubon's bill does is to tear up the Entente Cordiale completely. Signed by Edward VII on the 8th of April 1904, on the end of 100 years' hostility between the French and the English. It also makes a mockery of French commitment to federal Europe. Every country in the European community is proud of its status as a nation-state, but the French have tipped the scales towards chauvinism. They want harmonization, but on their terms. When Jacques Delors preaches the United States of Europe, he no doubt wants the capital in Strasbourg, the currency in francs, and a single language spoken, French. Some may conclude that the French language bill is ridiculous, but for the fact that Mr. Toubon insists the bill will be rigorously enforced. Yet without employing battalions of language police, it just won't be possible to prevent Frenchmen from using certain English words or expressions when they feel inspired to do so. To think otherwise is to live in cloud cuckoo land. My hunch is that the bill will probably go the way of so many other French bills, locked away in an anti-tilting filing cabinet, marked no further action. I should stress that my bill is solely retaliatory, a cause célèbre. My aim is to introduce an equivalent measure as a tit-for-tat response. I'm no enfant terrible, and I'm wholly in favour of the French, their food, their drink, and their beautiful countryside. While some will see their Toubon ball as a big joke, others see it as a discriminatory measure and offensive. What is the raison d'etre, Madam Speaker, if you'll excuse the phrase, for Toubon introducing his bill? Perhaps the French fear an invasion of English words shooting through the Channel Tunnel and so affecting their language with impurities. But isn't the French government's idea of a pure language a stone's throw away from a policy of ethnic cleansing and purity of race? Outlawing the use of English words is especially rich, coming as it does exactly 4 weeks after D-Day celebrations and commemorations, where we stood shoulder to shoulder with the French, remembering past events. Yet the entire French cabinet have endorsed a bill outlawing the language of the very people who liberated them 50 years ago and who are close market partners. It is a clear case of discrimination, not of race, not of age, not of sex, but of language. Yet languages are strengthened, not weakened, by the introduction of words from other countries. Purity of language is a contradiction in terms. English is a mélange, if I may say so, of Saxon, Norse, Icelandic, Dutch, German, French. There's also Arabic, take a Decca is Arabic, and Urdu, Raffia. To stand up for English is to defend a constantly evolving and expanding entity, which cannot be restricted or controlled. English could only produce Shakespeare and Joyce because of its inclusion of foreign words. Without French words, and there are some 1,400 of them, in regular use, the English language would have holes as large as those found in a Gruyere cheese.
At this stage, whether the honourable gentleman is speaking in favour of his own bill or against it, quite frankly.
If you give me just a couple more minutes, you'll see which way I'm turning. But I'm most grateful. The fantasy of the French to believe their language can ever be pure flies in the face of fundamental promise and premise that what language is all about. It's about having sufficient words to describe life. As life gets more complex, we need new words and phrases, not less. Now, how would my bill work, Madam Speaker? Well, by utilising a much underutilised national resource, by giving traffic wardens additional duties. 1,000 extra wardens were announced last night for London, no doubt in anticipation of this bill getting through the House. So in addition to using their eyes and gazing at parking meters, they will also be invited to keep their ears open in public places for any French word that might escape the lips of a passerby. The law would empower them to issue an on-the-spot language fine of £10 for every French word used. The service would be self-financing, with £1 of every £10 collected going toward the wages of the warden, the balance of £9 going towards paying the deficit in our balance of payments with France. So, Madam Speaker, forget words like baguette or croissant at breakfast. They're out. You won't be able to visit a cafe or a brasserie. No aperitifs, no hors d'oeuvres, in fact, no restaurant. Forget the table d'hôte. There's no question of the a la carte instead. It'll be left or right-hand side of the menu. And no nouvelle cuisine. Bon
Fish and chips.
Bon viveurs will be banned. You won't be able to shower your fiancée with bouquets, or meet her at a secret rendezvous, or buy her haute couture clothes. There'll be great difficulties having a ménage à trois. Crime passionnel is out of the question, and negligee will make a liaison dangereuse a little risque. If you are a gambling man, you would no longer hear the familiar words faites vos yeux or rien ne va plus when playing the tables. There's no question of feelings déjà vu. There's no way you can live in a pied-à-terre. If by chance you drive in a cul-de-sac, that would be a bit of a faux pas. In short, everyone in the country would have to mind their language and pardon their French. Because Mr. Toubon's bill is a fait accompli. What he doesn't realise, though, is that if he ever comes to Britain, he'll be refused entry unless he changed his name to Mr. Allgood. Our parliamentary processes, which we know from the honourable member, will also grind to a halt. No messages from the Commons to the Lords, but that, I think, can be taken care of by the 14th century French. But the royalty would also resent the fact that their coat of arms being laid bare, with the removal of the words "on y soit qui mal y pense." In fact, Parliament would exist no more because itself is a French word. But what a relief. No more 10-minute rule bills, Madam Speaker. At one fell swoop, the French, by their actions, would bring our nation's communications to its knees without a bone being broken. While Englishmen have free access to travel and frontiers have come down, their words must stay at home. Or perhaps the French will argue their bill banning English words is dealt with under subsidiarity. But just as the Maginot Line of fortification intended to stop the German invasion failed, so too will the French language prohibition bill. It won't stop the invasion of English words into French, and this is how the French see it, an invasion. The purpose of seeking leave, Madam Speaker, therefore, is to introduce a bill which I hope will not cause a furore, but will highlight the absurdity and unenforceability of the French law. The reason I'm raising this matter now is to prevent a hairline crack in the Anglo-Franco relations growing into a chasm. Finally, for those who say this is all a waste of time, the House will wish to know that they sat 1,978 hours and 14 minutes in 1987-88 and 1,373 hours and 53 minutes in 1991. So 10 minutes is but a drop in the ocean in the affairs of state. Furthermore, the French clearly don't think their bill is frivolous. Otherwise, they would not have passed this through Parliament. I personally believe discrimination against the country's language has serious implications if for no other reason it deprives the individual of his freedom of speech.
It has fallen. Jack Giles Brandreth to oppose.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Given the élan, the éclat, the insouciant savoir-faire with which my honourable friend has presented his bill, it may seem churlish to oppose it, but I believe that both for the sake of Franco-British relations and for the sake of the English language, a brief word of protest is called for. English, Madam Speaker, is the richest language in the world, but it is rich precisely because it isn't pure. It's a mongrel tongue. Emerson called it the sea, into which receives tributaries from every region under heaven. And my honourable friend has pointed out that the many countries that have contributed to the English language, including, of course, the French. They have given our language more than a certain je ne sais quoi. They have enriched our vocabulary for centuries and will do so for many more. For centuries, too, the French have been attempting to preserve the purity of their language, with the net result that their vocabulary is much smaller than ours. Shakespeare had a vocabulary of some 30,000 different words in all his plays. James Joyce, in just one work, as my honourable friend referred to, Ulysses, had a vocabulary of 30,000 different words, several of which, Madam Speaker, I hope you've not come across. But Molière, in his entire work, only had a vocabulary of some 9,000 words. So I understand the French desire to preserve the integrity of their language, but I fear that in an age when, happily for this country, English is the lingua franca of the global village, they're faced with an uphill struggle. So, in the bistro, the restaurant, the cafe, which my honourable friend obviously would like us to call eateries in future, while it's still going to be easier for a Frenchman to ask for un sandwich, even if the Assemblée Nationale would prefer him to ask for deux morceaux de pain avec quelque chose au milieu. I reckon that when it comes to the linguistic exchange rate mechanism, Madam Speaker, you cannot buck the market. My right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, the exemplification, if I may say so, of sang-froid, in this case it certainly is the mot juste, he and his French opposite number, Monsieur Alain Juppé, have just produced a joint publication marking the 90th anniversary of that special relationship for which there is no fitting English phrase. That's why we call it the Entente Cordiale. Half a century ago exactly, Madam Speaker, the then Prime Minister reminded this House that all his life he had been grateful for the contribution France has made to the glory and culture of Europe, above all for the sense of personal liberty that has radiated from the soul of France. In the name of personal liberty, in the spirit of rapprochement, and on the day that the Tour de France comes to Tunbridge Wells, I must oppose the bill.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in his bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Clear the lobbies. Clear the lobbies. Yes,
Point of order. Madam Speaker.
get the hat, I will hear him, otherwise I can't. Hat.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. A relatively simple matter for you to rule on. As the Treaty of Rome, as amended, includes the words acquis communautaire, before we vote, as we're thinking of voting, if my honourable friend's bill was successful, would the Treaty of Rome then cease to have effect?
I think the honourable gentleman is indulging in a lot of wishful thinking. Question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in his bill. Men of opinion say aye. Contrary, no. Ayes to the right, noes to the left. Tell us for the ayes, Mr. Anthony Steen and Mr. Michael Fabricant. Tell us for the noes, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn and Mr. Alan Simpson. Lock the doors. Order, order.
The eyes to the right, 45. The nose to the left, 149.
The eyes to the right, 45. The nose to the left, 149. So the nose have it. Order, unlock. Yes, Miss Dame Kenneth Bowman.
Is it in order for the honourable member for Chester, having spoken against the bill, to fail to follow his voice with his vote?
The honourable gentleman, of course, did declare his intention, but he has absolutely every right to abstain. So that was in order, yes. Orders of the day.
Police and Magistrates Courts Bill laws as amended to be considered.